how can you really bring people together and foster intercultural dialogue when you just can't cross borders anymore? So without any further ado, I'd like to hand you over to our panelists in this session, Katharina von Münster and Carolina Robertson von Trotter.
I am a sociologist and a cultural scientist at Karlsruhe Institute of Technology. They're the founding director of a Center for General and Cultural Studies. And for many years, I have, with my team, coordinated the Anna Lindh Foundation for Dialogue Between Cultures. The Anna Lindh Foundation, again, just very quickly so that you know roughly what background we have. The Anna Lindh Foundation was founded 16 years ago, and it is made up as an intergovernmental foundation with the 42 countries from the Euromed. And most importantly, and I think for our panel today, its backbone is a very unique, very diverse network of networks from researchers and people from policy making to, of course, theaters and cinema and story initiatives, NGOs, and so on. So we are a very, very diverse background for the conversation we're going to have today, and we of course have quite a lot to tell you about challenges, but I think also about chances that we've been making. I think that's probably what we want to talk about this afternoon. I shall hand over now to Katharina. I don't see more, but I hope you're still there.
Yes, Karen, thank you so much. I hope you can see me now. My name is Katharina von Münster. I'm the head of the ENSA program, that is short for Development Policy Exchange Program for Schools. We work under the umbrella of Engagement Global or Engagement Global. It's an organization funded by the German Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development. And just to start off, I would like to thank the organizers for bringing this panel together. I'm very happy that you also put a focus on how especially young people interact and communicate in these times of crisis, because unfortunately often they're kind of not so much in the focus of international reporting or otherwise. So what do we do if the Corona is not around? So we organize international exchange between students from German schools and schools from the global south, that is countries in Africa and Asia and Latin America and Southeast Europe. And we fund those programs financially. And we also provide, until COVID pandemic started, we provide educational training to the German groups, mainly for practical reasons, only to the German groups. And in those trainings, we focus on SDGs, on global learning, on how everybody, every one of us, and especially young people, can make a contribution to creating a better, more sustainable world. And obviously, this all changed when the pandemic came around. Physical encounters were not possible anymore, but as Caroline already mentioned, we also see a lot of new opportunities that opened up, and obviously also challenges. And I think we'll discuss that now in the second part of our presentation. So I would give back to Caroline.
Thank you very much. I think also with thanks to Deutsche Welle. I think listening to what you do, I think that ties in very well with what we do, because the Anna Lindh Foundation as a foundation, not just the German network, focuses particularly on youth and women, empowering them, because we want to have more sustainable and inclusive societies. We want to celebrate our diversity. We also want to understand diversity and exchange views where we don't always agree. I think this is an important point to make. We focus very much on capacity building training events and across the networks, but of course also within our own networks. And we also then have debates, online debates now, which have, of course, become a focal point now that we have the situation with COVID. But I think that possibly the points which we have to look at more clearly is when we look at our differences, we tend to look very often at cultural, ethnic, religious difference. And we forget very often to understand more about the huge differences between the North and the South. For the start, of course, demographic difference. We are living in the European EU countries and in all European countries in what I suppose we can describe as more aging societies, where we often look for young people to come and bring in their competencies and support us in our societies. We have not quite learned yet always to welcome them the way we should be. And on the other hand, we don't understand the enormous pressure that the social inequalities, the inequalities are leading to in very diverse southern countries with young populations. We find even also on the northern shores, on the Mediterranean shores. I'm at the moment in Andalusia, where we see there is also a high unemployment with young people. So I feel when we talk about how we have to look to the challenges, not just of COVID, they have become, I think, highlighted through COVID. But as we've already, in our first few sentences, made, I think, clear, giving us also new chances, because we do use these enormous, which digitization has provided us, to be able to get in touch with each other and to debate and also to share experiences, to share facts and figures, which we couldn't do just at our annual or maybe just within programs where put up. So I think we have both of these points that we have to look at. So maybe my point would be that we have to talk about challenges, we have to look about the general challenge. Polarization. The things that were also mentioned this morning in the opening address by Peter Limburg, when we talk about the other side of digitization and the tools of digitization, that we have to deal with the question of the quality of sources, of how we combat radicalization and fake news. So I think on the whole, my main hypothesis would be that to think about what I suppose a kind of societal literacy, social, cultural, scientific data literacy can be encompassed in our programs of sharing, of learning together, and of celebrating diversity, but not in a naive way. Maybe that would be a first hypothesis I would like to make here. And I'll turn back now to Katharina, who I'm sure will have some more from her point of view.
I would love to add something, but I heard that just another panelist joined our discussion. I would like to include him in that. Professor Weiner, I believe you're online now as well.
I'm online because I didn't search on my laptop, unfortunately. So, can you hear me?
Unfortunately, no.
So, then I have still to retry.
Yeah, unfortunately, we cannot really hear you. Maybe you want to check out again and then try to log back in.
you either, Katharina. Are you hearing me? I don't hear you.
Sorry, I switched off my microphone. Yeah, sorry. Sorry about that. So if that's okay with everybody, I would just maybe share our main takeaways from the COVID pandemic. So, I mean, when the pandemic started, the schools that we are working with came to us with two questions. The first one was, when can we travel again? And the second one was, how can we continue working with our partners? And obviously, to the first question, we could not really provide any answer until today. It's very difficult to provide an answer, especially when you're looking at traveling to countries in the global south. But to the second question, how can we continue working our partnerships? We could provide a few answers, and that's also already an opportunity that opened up for us. As I mentioned earlier, in the beginning, we only worked for pragmatic reasons with the German groups inside Germany in the educational training programs. And due to the digitization of our program, we could also include the partners from the Global South. And that was a very big highlight, not only for our projects, but also for us as a program ourselves. We could not totally replace with the online formats that we provided physical encounters. And that's, I think, also a takeaway that many of us, I think personally, but also professionally, already realized a lot can be done online, but especially when it comes to interpersonal relationship building, when it comes really to getting to know each other, you need the physical encounter. But online meetings have a lot of great advantages: the flexibility, the possibility to include groups that are usually not included. So we see that as a great opportunity that opened up to include it also post-COVID, hopefully, to have a mix of online, offline formats for our schools and for young people internationally, not only our program, but also other programs, to engage young people on a long-term basis. But there are obviously also challenges, and I think one of the big lessons I think that we internationally also need to learn, especially when it comes to digital exchanges between young people from Global North and Global South, we need an investment in the digital infrastructure. I mean, we in Germany realize that, but many other countries too. And we also need that, especially if we want to work with our partners on eye level in the Global South, we need also investment in digital infrastructure there, because this was really one of the major handicaps for many online formats, that because of the lack of digital infrastructure, the lack of access of individuals to personal computers or other mobile devices, virtual exchange was not always possible. And if we want to use this as a kind of tool also for strengthening partnerships and for encouraging young people to interact without traveling and without using a plane, then we really have to invest more in this kind of also digital infrastructure and overcome this digital divide that exists between Global North and the Global South. So this is one of the challenges that we see for the future. If we want to continue working in virtual exchanges, we really need that kind of investment in the digital infrastructure, and also giving schools, as we are working with schools, as one of the main challenges for schools in the Global North and South, to give teachers and students resources for these kind of activities, and to realize that these kind of activities are not a luxury add-on for school programs, but should really become part of the school curricula to foster international relationships.
Absolutely.
And with this, I would...
For this excellent improvisation until now. My name is Frank Hofmann. I should have been your moderator from the beginning, which did not work out, but I think you managed all this excellently. As we are already at this point here, I would like to go into one or two questions that popped up in my mind preparing this session here. A question to both of you, and please answer if you think it's up to you. This pandemic, the last 14, 15 months, showed us that maybe we are observing an extreme step forward when it comes to communication how we are doing this right now here. But I'm really wondering what that means for your work. Katharina, for yours example, for your in particular, how can you provide intercultural dialogue in these times? And what did you learn out of this crisis until today?
Yeah, so maybe just to make it a little more concrete, I'm just giving you an example of one of our partnerships that I think was very successful. We're talking about two schools, vocational training schools, where the students learn to work later on in the textile industry. So those schools plan to meet each other physically in Mozambique and later on in Hamburg, but that did not work out because of COVID, and then they really successfully translated their project into the virtual space. Their project was working with organic colors or growing plants to make organic colors to dye fabrics. So what they did, they combined in the kind of virtual learning trip, as we call it, they combined online and offline sessions. So offline, they worked individually on, growing the plants, on making the colors, organic colors, and then dyeing the textiles, the fabrics that they have. And then they made a presentation online on a whiteboard, and then later on shared it again in the online session. And from then on, the discussion went further. How could they, continue working on this kind of project in the future. So I think this combination of online, offline formats was something that will definitely also continue in the future, because online formats can be a very great complement, I think, to physical encounters. As I said before, I don't believe that physical encounters can be totally replaced by online meetings, as even with all the best tools that there are, and there are a lot of good tools out there, definitely, for sure. But we think it is a great complement in preparing virtual exchanges and also evaluating them later on, and be more inclusive also to groups that might have a challenge to travel, that don't get a visa, for instance, which is a big issue in our programs between Global South and Global North. So this can be kind of bridges to overcome or to tackle those challenges.
Thank you very much indeed, Ms. von Trotha. When I think about the last, again, 14, 15 months, and I would like to focus here a little bit on not the practical issues, but what more the idea of what this is going to do with us and to intercultural dialogue. This experience, a virus that is hitting the world, that hit the world, as we have learned 1.5 years ago already, and then all the development we were going through. What is this going to do us culturally? What do you think?
Well, I think, first of all, I would very much agree with what Katharina has been saying, that if we are looking at the positive side, I would hope that through using these tools, being able to meet online more often and in a much more international, kind of society, or a much more international network. We suddenly have, instead of just having networks from Germany, then there's 17 countries around the table. Then I would hope if we can change, if we can keep then and being more often, we can learn to understand and to show interest more, which is the very first start before you start talking about whether we're going to change the ways that we react to different diversities, to different identities and pluralities. But I think that certainly it is going to make us change. I'd like to, if I just one thing, that the time is too short, I'd like to give you one example also, which we did as a German network, and it was also shown on the Long Night of Ideas just recently by the Foreign Ministry here in Germany. We set up to let everybody understand how different COVID was impacting people in different cultures. Invited from the different countries, young people, to make a video, and we now have 40 videos from 40 NGOs in many countries from the Global South and the Global North. So I think, I hope, and we've seen also with we do this with our trend survey, which we do every 3 or 4 years at the Foundation, that we see on many, many areas, young people, their ideas are not so far apart. So I think, with dissemination, change, with, I suppose, just interest in diversity, that I hope we can keep diversity, celebrate diversity, but at the same time find issues which have to be prioritized by us all, which I think, of course, from sustainability, inclusiveness, and climate change, many others which we can talk about across society better.
I would like to add one more question to that, referring a little bit more to your scientific work at the Karlsruhe Institute for Technology, rather than you as a representative of the Anna Lindh Foundation. The moment we are living in at the moment is a moment of inequity when it comes to vaccines, for example. We are very lucky that only after a few months the world has some vaccines that are really properly working. However, the global south is lacking these vaccines, and is lacking vaccination. And obviously, there's a rift here. And I'm wondering, when it comes again to your scientific work back at the KIT, what do you think is going to do this when it comes to dialogue and for the future between the global north and global south?
Well, again, I think very rightly so, Deutsche Welle is concentrating on interdisciplinarity. And obviously at KIT we have scientists who are very much looking at the way COVID is, through aerosols, is being transmitted. They are, of course, connected to the Helmholtz research and to other research areas. I'm a sociologist. I'm not into the areas of the more scientific debate on the way you make vaccines. But when you talk about how they have to be disseminated, I think we have to see indeed how we have an interdisciplinary, including also, of course, property rights, which, as we know, is a huge debate here within the German research situation, but also I'm very pleased, I'm Scottish, British and German and European, so I was very pleased to see at the G7 summit that be interdisciplinary to appreciate what are the questions we are asking. I think it's very much also about asking questions, because sometimes it's a bit taboo. I mean, society has a lot of work together with China. We have also a research project on Culture China, which Center is involved in the area of public dialogue and public science. So how do we all talk about interdisciplinary awareness across the disciplines, even in very experienced scientific backgrounds, which of course we need. I think we need specialists, but we need also to have bridges between different disciplines, even within the scientific setting. So I know that's a bit of a broad answer to what you're answering, but I think it's a very important one, because we tend to think in sectoral ways of thinking and elements, and we really have to have this interdisciplinary and intercultural dialogue around the table. So we know that, vaccines have to be distributed globally in the global south, very importantly so, and that otherwise we are not going to get into this pandemic. And that's also something we can learn not from the pandemic just for this situation, but I think it must be ongoing. For sustainability, for climate change, for many others, we really need to look at our instruments also of funding, our instruments of how we put projects together, so that we get out just of our very specialized corners, which of course are international and are in their own disciplines in contact with each other, but we do need to have a different kind of outreach.
Thank you very much. I would like to give the same question back to you, Catherine, and I would like to emphasize a little bit more on the sociological and psychological impact on that. What do you think is this inequity doing to your network and the people interacting with, knowing that if I have the luck to sit in Paris, Berlin, Frankfurt, or New York today, I already can be vaccinated. However, until recently, then there was not a single jab being distributed to a country like Chad in Africa, for example. And I'm wondering what this inequity is doing to your network and the people you are cooperating with.
Yeah, thank you for that question. I think it's a very important question indeed, and it's a question that's troubling a lot of our German students and German schools, especially this inequality that we not only see in COVID times, but COVID probably highlighted these inequalities even further due to the unequal distribution of vaccines. As in the past, I mean, this topic is actually constantly on the minds of our schools, because even before COVID, we have this issue of just practical issues like issuing of visas, and it's always, not always, but very often a challenge for our German groups to get their counterparts, their partners from the Global South, to come and visit in Germany, not because they don't have the funding, they have the funding that's provided by us, but because it's often hard to get visas for student groups. And this goes, I mean, this list kind of inequality, where inequalities exist, goes on, and I really hope that it has been often repeated, but I really hope that one of the lessons really learned from this pandemic is that we have to, come closer, work closer together, and we have to invest also in these kind of exchanges, in digital infrastructure, in resources for the schools, for the teachers, to be really able to continue working on this goal that the United Nations set themselves, leave no one behind, and hopefully leave no one offline, and foster global partnerships.
Excellent. I think this is a good final word for this session. Unfortunately, we couldn't bring in Jakob Rühner of the University of Bonn, who would have been representing the Saving Banks Research Foundation. And thank you all very much for this little bit rocky panel, but I think we got something out of it. Thank you very much indeed, and please continue with your excellent work.